Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Tuesday's edition, and we're broadcasting from Newport Beach and the great state of Idaho. Andrew, welcome back to the show. Happy to have you with me today.
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's a beautiful day here in Idaho. I hope it's a beautiful day down in Southern California.
A little toasty, but we'll take it.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, well, I tell you what, I'm really happy that you're on today because I want you to talk real life economy stuff going on and talk a lot about Red Balloon, the construction projects really going on. But I'm going to get that. It's sort of a tease for a little bit later in the show. Let's talk a little bit about the political reality of what's happening right now, because you've seen polls sort of bouncing around a little bit, but you and I have talked about this in the past. I'm getting a sense that the polls are finally breaking based on the inflation number. How are you seeing things right now? Politically speaking.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think that it is watching those polls, you need to be really careful. I actually talked to one of the top pollsters in DC, and he gave me a little insider information. He said, ever since Biden's Hitler speech, as some people are calling it, with the red background and the Marines, ever since that speech, a lot of Republicans have not been answering polls anymore because they feel like, why should I tell you what my political leaning is so you can hunt me down, or the IRS or the FBI or any of those other three-letter organizations can come after me. He said, so it's just been shocking how Republicans simply won't answer the questions anymore. And so you're going to start to get a skew in those poll numbers. He said, but he says the voters who will talk to him still believe in the anonymity that they can achieve in the voting booth. And so his opinion is that the polls are increasingly wrong because Republicans simply won't respond because they're afraid of whatever this administration might try and do to them as retaliatory. And if you have that kind of information, plus people are still going to vote the way that they believe, man, I increasingly believe we're going to have a red wave coming in November, which would be very exciting. And obviously, which we're seeing in Europe right now. People are fed up. I feel like COVID and the Great Reset, all of that stuff was kind of an accelerator, and people finally woke up. And this is the problem with conservatives. We want to just keep our head down, do our job, but sometimes you got to wake up, and hopefully we stay awake. But you see Italy, Sweden, even Liz Truss in the UK. I was on a UK TV station over the weekend, and she just passed a budget that cut taxes and is trying to cut government spending and is trying to grow their economy again. So we're seeing these little excitement, little bits of good news politically around the world. And I think America's been a little behind the curve, but increasingly I'm believing that we're going to see some excitement when it comes to November.
It's really interesting, even with the caveat that you just said about Republicans not wanting to reveal who they're going to vote for. One clear issue is coming out in Republicans' favor, and that means Americans are increasingly trusting Republicans when it comes to the economy and when it comes to inflation. There's not even a question about it right now. And one interesting thing I'm finding, despite those concerns, generic ballot. Now, let's sort of clarify this for on. Generic ballot is really a simple question. Do you favor the Republicans or the Democrats in your congressional vote? It's a simple, straight up question. However, a lot of the national polls had it like +1R, +1D. Shockingly, NBC came out after CBS published a report basically saying it was +1. NBC came out, not exactly a Republican bastion, okay, and said the generic ballot was +5. When you dig deeper into those numbers, the swing state number, Andrew, for states that are in play was +9. If there's any truth to the +9, and we're not supporting it because we didn't take the poll, but if there's any truth to that +9, you're looking at a pretty significant gain in the House of Representatives. Republicans are up 19 points on the economy right now. Interest rates are ticking north, okay? They're going to continue their upward trajectory. Stock market, tried to rally a little bit today, came back, it's now negative again. There's more evidence, Andrew, that the Democrats, you can never trust Democrats with the economy because of their tax and spend mentality. And so while I appreciate the concern, something is going right. And I can't unequivocally say right now it's a red wave, but it does look like we're drifting in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope so. Although even the Republicans, you have some Republican governors who have a scorecard, right? The unemployment's very low in their state. You see the growth numbers. You see, 1 million people moving from blue states to red states. You see billions of dollars of taxable income moving from blue states to red states. So people are voting with their feet.
Yeah.
But I do need to remind people, Republicans, not all Republicans are the same, right? Liz Cheney is still technically a Republican.
Right.
And so, although it may be in name only, but the reality is there was a lot of government spending under the Bush's and the Bush administration. And so just because Republicans are getting in, my encouragement to people is, man, we still have to hold them accountable, because that's the problem. Is we're like, oh, great, we've got Republicans in, it's going to be a pass, everything's going to be amazing. And that's not necessarily true, because there are Republicans and there are Republicans. And so if we, I hope we're going to get a red wave, but I hope it's not a red wave full of rhinos, because that's not going to do us any good.
Well, it's marginally better than having a Democrat, for sure.
Granted,
because Democrats vote in lock stock. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're on the Manchin side or the Bernie Sanders side. They all vote. I mean, one thing about the Democrats, Andrew, I respect them for this. They stick together.
They know how to work together. Yeah.
The quote conservative Democrats, there are none, but we'll call them moderate Democrats, and the radicals, which composes most of the party, on key legislation, they vote together. It's like a block. Yeah. So I used to get a little concerned about that. Now I start thinking, give me a rhino before you give me a Democrat.
Because at least they'll push back at something. Although I heard one analogy that it feels like we're kind of locked up in the trunk of a car, and the Democrats are driving at the cliff at about 70 miles an hour. The rhinos are only driving at 50 miles an hour, and the conservative Republicans are creeping towards the cliff, but they're still going the same direction. So we need people to turn that car around, because we'd like to not be locked up in this trunk anymore.
Well, I think we're going to see that. I mean, Biden approval rating is still, our latest polling we have, he's underwater 11 points.
Yeah.
Shockingly, the vice president's only underwater 12. There have been times she's underwater 20 or 30 points. But anyhow, we're not voting for her.
No.
Look, let's break this down. Americans are really concerned about their pocketbooks.
Yeah.
71% say they can't keep up with inflation and heating bills. Now, it's not going to necessarily affect all the country, but in the Northeast, where we've talked about it a lot, those heating bills are really projected to skyrocket. Give me your take on that. I mean, because it looks problematic getting into the winter here.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that obviously drive inflation. Labor shortage is a big one. And we've talked about that on this show before, that there's simply not enough people to get all the work done. The fact that we're in a recession and yet we have over 11 million open jobs right now, right? There's just not enough people. And so supply and demand dictates that you're going to have prices go up, because the cost of labor is going to have to go up, because the companies are so desperate to hire people. But the other thing that drives up costs is not just what the Federal Reserve is doing, or not just what the government's doing, is when you destroy innovation in America. And that goes to things like drilling. That goes to things like figuring out more creative ways to get energy costs, to get new products and services on the market. And when you force everyone home for 2 years, and when you kill a lot of the drilling and great technology and innovation around oil and gas, it will drive prices up almost no matter what the government does on the spending and the Fed rate and so on and so forth. So you have these factors, and that's why when the Fed continues to raise the interest rate, it's not really having an impact on inflation, right? We see inflation that's kind of been hovering around 8 to 9% and not really going anywhere, even though the Fed has been aggressively raising those interest rates. So until the administration gets out of the way, lets the American people get back to the innovation that we used to be good at in oil and gas and all these other pieces, we're not going to see a turnaround in inflation. You need to let the free market, you need to let the economy breathe and work and do its thing. And when you get in the way of that, again, it almost doesn't matter what the Fed does. The Fed does have an impact, but you've got to let that innovation happen, because that drives the supply of goods and services that allows the demand to do what it's supposed to do.
Well, it's really interesting. I was watching what I call a lot of the pom-pom boys on the various financial markets this morning. They're all screaming and yelling about the Fed this, the Fed that. It's like they go to bed. They eat, sleep, and breathe the Federal Reserve.
That's
Forget
right.
what a company does or how much profit it makes or its share structure or its innovation. It's all Fed, 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 Fed. That's it. And you know what? Easy money made a lot of people look really smart. But
Yeah.
now, tight money, they're screaming, "Oh my God, this is that." And yet we saw news that came out today. American Confidence Index was high. People were still buying homes. I mean, we're going to talk about that a little bit in a minute with you, but the economy is still moving along. Could it be doing a whole lot better? Absolutely. A CEO of an energy company came on there in the natural gas business, which is the cleanest fuel. Okay, it's not like coal, it's not like oil. The cleanest fuel we have. They can't get permitting to build more pipelines. They said,
that's right.
Hey, we can't produce anymore. We're producing the maximum we can for the pipelines we have. We'd be happy to produce more, but we don't have the pipelines to put it in. That seems to me like a pretty easy fix, but nothing's easy when it comes to environmental, oil, when you got Democrats in control of the White House.
That's exactly right. They don't love that stuff. They're using their environmental stances to just try and nuke this economy and make themselves a lot of money, right? Al Gore was the first environmental billionaire that we've ever had. He used this economic policy and this green energy policy to make himself a shocking amount of money. So no, this is a sad plight that we're in. Again, I hope that November turns things around a little bit. And then I hope the Republicans actually act like Republicans and allow the American innovation to happen again, because that's what we need. That's how we get on top of all of this.
Well, you mentioned people moving from blue states to red states. I mean, I can think of three in particular that are taking advantage of this, and in no particular order: Idaho, where you are, the great state of Texas, 1,000 people a day moving there, and 600 a day into Florida, which is staring down a hurricane right now. So,
that's right.
I mean, those red states, Andrew, they are absorbing people. I want you to give a little perspective, because you're the CEO of Red Balloon, a technology company, an innovative company. You deal with employees, employers all over the country. Plus, you have a building business that you're doing. Give our audience some perspective, real life, because you're really at ground zero on the employment front and literally on the building and construction front.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and we're blessed. I mean, we have thousands of businesses on redballoon.work, which is the nation's largest conservative job board. And so I get a chance to talk to people on the ground, plumbing companies and HVAC companies and private security companies all over the country. And so I get these insights from people that aren't going to be in the media, that aren't going to be telling all the stories that are pushing an agenda. They're simply people trying to get the job done, trying to make the American economy thrive and be healthy. And here's the reality. What I'm hearing from a lot of them is we're tight on labor. I've still got as much work as I want to do, but I am worried about a recession if the Democrats keep doing their thing, right? And then they tell me stories of, man, but I hired people off redballoon.work and they are the innovators at my company. I was just talking to Matt at Caucus Room out of Colorado, and he's hired a number of engineers and product people. And Caucus Room is just a great app if you want to do local political activism on the right. It's a fantastic app. He's hired a bunch of people, and he said, when you hire the right people, you're able to innovate past problems. You're able to innovate past a recession. And that's actually what we've been helping a lot of companies do right now, is when you think about when you have a really great workforce and you have a work culture that is joyful and not woke, you are going to be able to innovate past a recession. So you don't have to worry about a recession the same way, because you're working together to solve a business problem, not to push a political ideology on your customers, on your employees, or on your shareholders. So it's been really exciting to see what's going on. Clearly, the economy is disrupted, but when you had in 1 year, almost $20 billion of taxable income move from New York to Florida, that is going to have a dramatic impact on the budgets for those states, on the businesses in those states. So the nice part is we're getting a scorecard. You mentioned the housing development, and I'm actually in the middle of, just because I needed something else to do so that I didn't get bored.
Red Balloon's not enough.
Not enough, and everything else I got going. So I have the largest housing development ever in Moscow, Idaho. It's 115 houses, which is, in a big city, that's not that big a deal, but in a little college town like this, that's massive. And look, when you're on the ground fighting this stuff, they talk about 9% inflation. Well, guess what? Concrete and rebar are up 50% in the last 12 months. Yeah. 50%, right? And when we're putting in thousands of cubic yards of concrete, guess what? That actually adds up. And the problem is those costs have to be passed on to the homeowner, who then is in a position where they can't afford a house. And so you're stifling the economy. You're hurting people who are buying starter homes, right? They always talk about, well, we're sending out these checks. It's going to be amazing. When you drive inflation, it actually drives up the cost of things like homes for families who are just trying to enter the market. And so you're hurting the people who actually are on the lower income side. And so don't ever believe it when they say, well, it's just trying to go after the rich and so on and so forth. No. When you go after someone who's trying to be innovative, trying to do a housing development, those costs add up. And at some point, they get passed on to the family who's trying to buy their first home. So all of these impacts that the Republicans and the Democrats are talking about all the time have a huge impact on the lives of Americans. And so that's, again, why I hope that the election goes red and that Americans stay awake and continue to hold the Republicans' feet to the fire and actually push on these issues so that we don't get, a slower version of the same thing.
Let me ask you this, Andrew, on what you're developing right now, because this has far-reaching effects on the economy. Is your target buyers, are they first-time buyers? Are they second-term buyers? Because, that you may sort of downplay and say, well, it's 115 units, it's Moscow, Idaho. Idaho is a growing state. You have a housing shortage in Idaho. So what you're doing is probably either going to be absorbed by first-time buyers or maybe second-time buyers.
That's right. That's right. So well, what we see as a housing development, my wife and I talk about it, we see it as hospitality because there's people moving to Idaho to escape the craziness in California or Portland or Seattle. And we see it as hospitality. We want housing that's fantastic. We want it to be market-driven, affordable housing, not government-driven, but market-driven, affordable housing. And what that means is there was one section of the development that we are going to be able to do for about $2 million. And the city was going to be able to do it for about $7 million, which tells you what kind of waste and lack of innovation you have when you have a government-driven project, right? So we think, man, if we can really work our tails off, work as many hours as I can stay awake to come up with innovative solutions to get prices down, then I'm going to be able to pass that on to those first-time home buyers who are now going to be able to afford a house that's not subsidized by the government, but is subsidized by the innovation of someone who's willing to work really hard and come up with creative solutions to keep those prices down. So that's what we're doing. And here's what I love, Mark. When you work really hard like that, when you do that kind of innovation, well, guess what? I pre-sold 85% of my lots in the first 2 weeks because people know when you've got their back, when you're trying to get the prices down based on good work, innovation. And we've got an alley system so you can build a neighborhood and you've got garages in the back. So we're putting our time and effort into making this something that is actually hospitality for people. And if you do that, you can be rewarded, but it is a lot of work.
Well, let me ask you, what was the city's reaction when you told them you could do it for a fraction of what they told you it was going to cost? I mean, they had to be
Well, the worst thing is they believe me. They're like, oh yeah, because when we do projects, it takes like 3 to 4 times the cost of when, an entrepreneur does the project. And I think that is the lesson of America right now, right? When the government tries to do things, it will cost exponentially more than an entrepreneur who it's their money, they've got skin in the game, and they're willing to figure out ways to make a creative solution to those problems. Whereas if you're a government bureaucrat, and again, there's some really good people in the city government that I know here, but if you're one of those people, it's not your money. You don't have skin in the game. You don't stay up all night trying to figure out what's a way that we could get that sidewalk to go around that pole instead of spending $100,000 to move that pole, right? It's all those little decisions. And so that's what America needs to get back to. We need to get back to the innovation that allows entrepreneurs to do things and let government just get out of the way.
You know what? That is music to my ears. It really is. And my gut feeling, Andrew, tells me we are heading in the right direction. Now, you've had some media types come out predominantly on the left side and say, hey, listen, these social issues are going to kill the Republicans. There's some evidence coming out that, as that Lee Corso says, not so fast here. A lot of Americans apparently, and I'm going to tread lightly here on these social issues, but apparently a lot of Republicans, independents, and some Democrats are saying, hey, you know what? 15 weeks to have an abortion, that's not the most unreasonable situation. Matter of fact, a plurality of Americans now think that's a pretty reasonable position to take. Whereas the Democratic Party is saying we want abortion up to 40 weeks.
Right.
I mean, there used to be, the liberal media was saying, oh, it's going to kill the Republicans. There's some evidence coming out that no, it's not going to kill the Republicans. A lot of people think, hey, this is sort of reasonable. And Democratic efforts to paint Republicans as extremists on this, they do not appear to be working.
No, they're not working. And here's the reality is also people are attracted to people, to politicians, to leaders who are actually brave and courageous and have their own opinion, right?
Yeah.
When if you're a politician, you're, constantly testing the wind to see, I wonder which direction the voters are, and you don't actually have your own conviction. You don't actually have your own standard of truth that you want to hold yourself to. At some point, people do not go for that. They want to be drawn to a leader who actually has an opinion. And so if you're a Republican out there and you think there's no abortion or whatever your case is, and I have very strong opinions on this, but no matter what your position is, hold to that opinion. Be brave, be courageous, and don't just go with what the media says, because the media is trying to manipulate you if you're a Republican candidate, right? If you're in politics, the media is doing everything they can to make you believe that you have a crazy idea and you should go to the left. Don't believe it. Be courageous, be a leader, do the right thing.
Well, I'm glad you said that. I got a couple other social issue hot buttons, and I'm going to come back to your comment about Biden's speech in a minute, but when I heard the White House press secretary asked a simple question about the Democratic responsibility for all the crime, particularly crime in blue cities and blue states, her response was, it's complicated.
Right.
It's not complicated. These are criminals who are wreaking havoc in these cities. You saw that flash mob go into a Philadelphia convenience store. What are the ramifications? None.
Yep.
You walk into, you see other things. It's just really, how can you call it that when most Americans don't feel safe in these blue cities? That's why they're leaving.
Right. And you look what, Citadel, the second largest hedge fund in the world, they moved out of Chicago, and the executives, part of it was taxes and regulation, and the CEO was making $200 million a year, which he just took that taxable income down to Florida. What do you think that'll do to the budgets of those different cities? But they asked, why are you moving? He's like, well, my executives are being knifed and mugged after work when they're leaving our building. And guess what? That's actually really hard on morale when you, right? And so they moved to Miami, and you think, well, is Miami that much better? Well, actually, evidently it is, because they moved there. And that's where you see these market forces driving people out of places like Chicago and New York, in these big liberal cities. And it's just going to be really interesting, because all of a sudden New York's going to have less budget to pay for policemen. And you get to a downtown Seattle right now. I talked to a friend who lives in Seattle. He's like, you don't go there because the liberal policies actually have impacts on the crime rate, because you have homelessness that is not only tolerated, it is encouraged. It is, they give you out, they give you tents, they give you drugs. They actually encourage this type of behavior. Well, when you do that, it's just going to have horrible impacts on the quality of life for everyone. And so the people who are hardworking Americans, they're going to be like, you know what? See you later. I'm out of here.
Right.
And when you start to do that, it has a steamroll effect. It has a snowball effect. I think it'll be really interesting to see what the next 10 years holds for these cities, because the Democratic policies are showing that they simply are not working. And at some point, that's not going to be papered over anymore.
Right. There's a reason they're calling West Palm Beach Wall Street South. Because it's happening. And in a county where I have a lot of economic ties, the real estate prices haven't gone down that much because so many people are moving in. But let me shift another one here. Americans really concerned about inflation in the economy. They're concerned about crime. Surprisingly, really, the number 3 issue on Republicans, They want to see that border secure. And the Democrats, they can't, quote, blame it on anybody but themselves. This, you know how Democrats, they always shift the blame on issues. Everybody sees it. This is a pure Democratic issue. And people are saying, wait, enough is enough. And yet they continue to come. And then what do we have happen? We have Joe Biden saying nothing. He's right. He hasn't even been to the border. Kamala Harris, the border czar, has been there once. Former President Obama claims you're a racist because, you know, you support enforcing the border. I mean, Andrew, people look at these three politicians in particular and go, I don't share any beliefs with these people whatsoever. And I think, again, we saw Myra Flores win in the deep blue area and coming from Republican side. I think we're going to see more of that in South Texas and across the country.
Well, I think this is actually a political strategy that I hope backfires, because I've talked to people who are in the DC area, and they said, look, illegal immigrants have predominantly voted blue. They have voted for Democrats. And so I think that this is actually a political strategy to flood those states with illegal immigrants that they're hoping will predominantly vote for Democrats. And will try and turn those red border states purple at the very least, if not blue, because they're going to try and let all of these people vote. And I thought it was so funny when 50 of these folks show up in Martha's Vineyard, and I was like, whoa, 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 no, not in our backyard, right? That was a funny event. The speed and the reaction of the left on that whole situation. But I actually think this is just a political move, right? I think Obama knows this. I think Biden's handlers actually know this, that they have historically had those immigrants vote with the Democrats, and they're trying to flood these border states that are predominantly red with people who are going to vote to the left. And obviously my hope would be that those people don't see the Democrats as the party, the party of hope or of caring or any of those things, but they actually realize that the American dream comes from hard work and innovation, not from government handouts. And if you want to be part of the American dream, you got to just get to work. Go ahead.
One point with it, you're really doing a quantum leap forward, assuming that there's a vote to legalize illegal immigrants so that they can vote. I think a lot of people are scratching. What's he talking about? Illegal immigrants voting? They can't vote right now. But the long-term strategy, I think the Democrats expect, what they're going to do, they're going to try to demonize Republicans like they always do. And again, that's why it's so important to win the House and the Senate. I mean, you win one of these bodies, at least for the next 2 years, nothing's going to happen on this issue. And look, what their miscalculation is, Andrew, Hispanic Americans, they want border security too. That's what they don't get. They think just because you have brown skin, you're going to vote Democrat. And that's not the case. Go visit South Florida, go visit South Texas. I think they just missed the boat on this one completely. But again, it's a quantum leap to go from their strategy of basically saying, well, let's flood them with illegals. Eventually, they're going to be able to get standing to where they can vote. I'm not so sure about that. But
that's what they'd like to do. You're absolutely right. Like, that is a quantum leap. I think that is what they would like to do, and I think that is their strategy. And this is where I think it will backfire if they pull that off. I know so many people who are from Mexico, and they just want to work hard, and they want actually what the Republicans are promising more, which is an America that's free and has the opportunity to work hard. And so that's where I think if the Democrats were able to make that quantum leap, get those people to vote, they're assuming that they'd all vote to the left. But my argument is a lot of hardworking illegal immigrants actually just want the American dream, which looks a lot like working hard and earning it yourself.
Yeah. Hey, we only got a couple minutes left, and a couple big pieces here. And I'm just sort of get right through them. The Biden student loan plan, CBO came out. They said the cost $400 billion and rising. To you and I, it's no surprise. I still think that may get a legal challenge. I hope so. I hope so on it too. And then what do you make, again, internationally, the Russians, they call up 300,000 people who are ill-trained, not trained. People are fleeing Russia. You're seeing satellite images of people, just trying to get out of the country. Andrew, this thing is going from bad to worse from the Russians. Where do you see it going from here?
Man, I think it's anybody's guess at this point. I think Putin is about as predictable and reliable as smoke in the air. It'll go anywhere at once. So I would find myself on the wrong side of the issue if I'm like, I know exactly what's going to happen. I think that Putin is trying to play as many political games as he can. I don't totally trust Zelensky, and I am sad that the Ukraine and Russian people are caught in the middle of these two egomaniacs who are trying to make a name for themselves while other people suffer. So, obviously my hopes and thoughts are with the people who are suffering because they are caught in the crosshairs of just a bad political situation.
Well, Sam, we're going to close it out on this. We got about a minute left. Speaking about crosshairs, my home state of Florida, they are staring at a big one coming in on the southwest coast. Whether it's going to hit Fort Myers, Sarasota, St. Pete, Tampa, we don't know the answer to that yet, but it is going to be a soaker. They're talking storm surge up to 10 feet. That is massive. That's going to cause a lot of flooding in an area that really can't handle it. So, Andrew, I remember back in 1992 when Hurricane Andrew hit in Dade County. Oh my goodness, you talk about work that needed to be done over the years. I mean, it was a contractor's paradise. We wish the best for the west coast of Florida, southwest Florida, but my goodness, there's 48 hours of trouble coming to my home state here.
Oh, absolutely. No. And yeah, again, thoughts and prayers are with those people. I hope people are safe. I hope, if you're being told to evacuate, nobody wants to evacuate, but it's probably a good idea. They don't give that order out lightly. So hopefully people are safe. Hopefully it just passes by. But here we are.
here we are, and we'll see how that thing goes. Andrew, look, I thank you again for giving a perspective for our viewers and listeners. Listen, redballoon.org, what a success story. You're doing a great job for the economy, for the United States, for Republicans in general, for people that are fair-minded and want a good place to work without all the political wokeness to deal with. Congratulations again on 85% sold out on your building project. Again, you're like the American hero. Keep doing what you're doing. You're an inspiration to a lot of people, Andrew.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's always grateful to be on your show and talk about, there's a lot of great things going on in America. Sometimes it gets depressing and you see all the things in the media, but the reality is if Americans are willing to work hard, to be courageous for other people, I still have high hopes for this nation.
Well, we'll speak soon, Andrew. I share your optimism, and folks, I'm very optimistic. Get out and vote. You can vote in about a week in some of these states. It's amazing. We have election month coming up starting in October. Andrew, thanks again for joining me. All the best. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much.
Okay, folks, that's it for today. As always, we cut through the propaganda. We give it to you straight. We're going to be following the stories as they develop, and we'll be with you tomorrow. Same bad time, same bad channel. Stay safe, everybody in Florida. Thank you for viewing and listening. See you on Wednesday.